Joining me now is Liberal MP Tim Wilson, Labor's Peter Khalil also this morning. Gentlemen, good morning to you, Peter. First to you, your reaction to this ban, and the nation's chosen the fact that Afghanistan, for example, that Egypt, also Saudi Arabia, not among those in the list. Do you think that, what do you make of it?
Good morning, Kieran, and belatedly Happy New Year. I think the point here is that there are a number of countries, as you mentioned, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Afghanistan, Turkey, that were left off the list. So if we took looking at this order, which is meant to actually prevent terrorism in the homeland, it's a very weak measure from a national security perspective, because you can have people coming from those countries which have real terrorism issues and problems coming into the States. So it's a blanket ban with massive holes in the blanket. Even in the countries like Iran and Iraq that have been under the ban in the order, what happens to a Sunni Muslim Kurd who's been fighting ISIS, who has a green card and wants to come back in? I think the problem with this order is that it has actually wrecked hundreds, thousands of lives, put everything into chaos with very minimal national security effect for the US. It's very political. It's all about Trump being able to say he's fulfilled his campaign promise of banning Muslims. From our perspective in Australia, and I would say I hope with all the major parties here, our values are that we don't believe in discriminating based on race or religion or origin with regard to immigration, and we got rid of that when we got rid of the White Australia policy.
Tim Wilson, what are your thoughts on this executive order? There have been some concerns from governments around the world, not our government. Incidentally, President Trump issued a statement just in the last little while in which he says the 7 countries named in the executive order are the same countries previously identified by the Obama administration as sources of terror. He also says that this is similar to what President Obama did in 2011 when he banned visas for refugees from Iraq for 6 months.
Well, I think the key thing to take out of this executive order is that it reinforces the policies that Australia has actually been having in making sure that we have proper health, identity and security assessments for anybody across the world who are coming here as a refugee. And so the importance of having proper processes avoids the risk where we get into political fallout where politicians decide to enact executive orders to stop individual countries. I can't speak, obviously, to what the decisions of or the intelligence within the US government around Obama's administration in the past. But what we do know is that Australia as a country has taken proper measures to make sure that particularly security assessments are done regardless of where people are coming from, which enables us to have the non-discriminatory proposal or process that Peter talks about, where people are accepted based on the legitimacy of their claim, not on the basis of their country of origin.
And that's a fair argument, Peter Khalil, in the sense that it creates support for our overall system by having it being thorough, as Tim points out. That underpins our system, doesn't it, Peter?
Sorry, I'm a bit confused. How is it thorough when you've got countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Jordan and Afghanistan who are not part of that executive order?
I'm talking about Australia's approach, not Mr Trump's.
Oh, well, Australia's approach is important. I mean, we have a strong vetting measures. We make sure that we assess the legitimacy of people coming into this country, and the Immigration Department does that. It's part of the assessment for visas right across the board for people that enter this country.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the point I was making. As Tim said, that underpins the broader support for that system in this country. But Tim Wilson, more broadly, are you worried about the message that this sends from a Trump administration to nations which, well, many are warning that this will play into the hands of groups like ISIS?
Well, I do agree with the fundamental thrust that Peter said before around the need to have a non-discriminatory policy, and that's the policy that we have. But I'm not going to get into commenting on every single thing that Donald Trump does. I think it's in our best interest to have a non-discriminatory policy with proper health, security and identity assessments, with rigid processes to make sure that we can have confidence in the Australians can have confidence in the process. That's what's in our national interest. I suspect that's probably what's in the United States' interest dangerous, but I'm not in the middle of their immigration department. I don't know their processes, and offering flippant commentary when you don't actually know the detail is not a good idea.
Sorry, Kieran, but this is the point, Kieran, that you made. This is the problem. This weakens our national security efforts because it plays right into the hands of the propaganda arm of ISIS. Okay? It is a weak measure. It doesn't cover countries that I mentioned before, like Saudi Arabia, which all the 9/11 bombers came from. And yet it is actually setting it up so that you can actually have propaganda that's articulated by ISIS to radicalise people based on this. It's created chaos. Our policy of non-discrimination as far as race, religion, gender is a very important aspect of our immigration policy, and this can only weaken it. And by the way, I should also add, you've got Conservative leaders like Theresa May who've actually stood tall for their dual citizens. She's instructed Boris Johnson, her Foreign Secretary, and Amber Rudd, her Home Affairs Secretary, to make strong representations to the Trump administration. All we've heard from Malcolm Turnbull and Julie Bishop is basically crickets.
Tim Wilson, should the government be more proactive in this regard in relation to dual nationals, Australians that might be caught up in this ban?
Well, of course we're going to stand up for our dual nationals, and we're going to stand up for Australians. Well, Peter's just come out with hypothetical scenarios. Well, government will deal with individuals on a case-by-case basis and defend Australians and support them as is necessary. But ultimately, the United States has a right to come up with its own policy around its issues of border protection and make its own decisions. My preference and my very strong appeal will always be for a position of non-discrimination in exactly the way we have, and that people are based on, or assessed are based on the legitimacy of their claim, and that they go through proper security, health and identity assessments. And that's the basis of our policy, but ultimately it's up to America to decide its own policy.
Tim Wilson, Peter Khalil, gentlemen, we're out of time. It's good to see you both. Happy New Year belatedly, but we'll talk to you soon. A quick break. Back in just a moment here on AM Agenda.